Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, there are no ladies in here. What happened? Oh, okay. All right. I'm right. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this press conference forum on the going-ons in Ambazonia. I want to believe that most of us, if not all of us in here, are aware of what is going on in Ambazonia, the conflict going on between the French Cameroon and the southern Cameroons, which we now call Ambazonia. You are also probably very well informed about the recent massacres in Ngarabo, Ntumba, Babanki, quite a number of places. And this press conference is geared towards addressing some of those humanitarian issues and massacres in these communities. And you will find on the high table here two different men in different colors. You can see they don't look like me. So that tells you we got a message coming, a very special message coming from them. But before we get there, we'd like us to know who is seated here on the high table. And I will start from the extreme over there and have one after the other just introduce themselves, your name and your leadership position, if any, in this Ambazonian revolution. Thank you.
My name is Elvis Kometa. I am here representing the SCNC, that is the Southern Cameroon's National Council. And of course, I am the chairman of the Restoration Council of the interim government.
Thank you. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. This is Reverend Asong. I'm the Undersecretary for Women's Services for the interim government of Ambazonia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, greetings, everyone. My name is W. Bruce Devalier of the law firm of Fine and Devalier, and we are honored here to appear and assist with this forum on behalf of the free people and independent people of Amazonia.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Dr. Samuel Ikomesako. I am president of the interim government and a member of the Ambazonia coalition team.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Bruce Fine. I'm also a partner with my colleague, Bruce Del Valle, at the law firm of Fine and Del Valle. And I also am privileged and honored to be in this room where we are all unified behind one idea: justice, honor, history, all mandate the independence of Ambazonia.
All right, thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Anglophone Bo Herbert. I'm the spokesperson for the movement for the restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroon. And Maurice is obviously a member of the Ambazonia coalition team.
Thank you, sir. Now you just mess up my voice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, once more again, it's a pleasure to have all of you here. Now, let me say that seated here on this high table, men and women who are part of what you know to be Team Ambazonia. Team Ambazonia is the coalition that is representing all of Ambazonia for the Swiss mediation that we all know shall be coming up sometime, I hope very soon. Team Ambazonia is retaining the services of our lawyers here. I think they've mentioned their law firm to help us take this struggle to the international legal arena. I will leave that to them to open up and that eventually to explain to us precisely what it is all about and the scope of what they're going to be doing. This is what we're going to do here today. We will start with a slide presentation. I hope I'm seeing a projector in here. Is there one? Oh, right here. Okay. So we will start with a slide presentation. After the slide presentation, our attorneys will do a formal presentation of what they plan to do in this case they are taking up against La République du Cameroun. And then after that, I think the floor will be open for questions and answers session. And anybody on the high table here will be welcome to answer those questions. All right, thank you very much. I will hand over to Comrade Bo, who will do the presentation of the slides. Mr. Bo. All right.
So my thanks to Comrade Crise Anu. Welcome to the National Press Club. Welcome to Washington. It is a tough time for everyone to be out, so we're glad that you're out. It's also a time for all of us to be very careful about what we're doing. So welcome again. It's a big delight for us to welcome you. We just want to try and, set the scene for what is going on in Ambazonia. Our topic is the French-backed genocide that's going on in Ambazonia. We will try in this slideshow to just carry you along where it all started, why it's going on, what you can do to help. So we're going to try, anyone who knows about Cameroon knows that there was a big Cameroon, a bigger Cameroon. It was a German Cameroon, written with a K. Very many people are nostalgic. Let me take that back. People like Mr. Biya are still nostalgic about the one Cameroon, that German Cameroon. And it's part of the reason why he believes that he can take possession of Ambazonia. On our slide there, you can see the part that shows Nigeria, our top map. The part that shows Nigeria indicates very clearly that that German Cameroon had a part of Nigeria, it had all of Ambazonia today, it had all of Equatorial Guinea next door, it had all of Gabon, it had all of the Central African Republic, and it had part of Chad. So if Mr. Biya is claiming a one and indivisible Cameroon, that is what he's referring to. And he is as expansionist as Hitler was, and is one of the reasons why he needs to be stopped. But I'd like to answer 4 questions in this slide. What is going on in Ambazonia? How did we get here? What is the way forward? And how can you help? So first with what's going on. Now, this country has inspired the world with respect to freedom. And when I say this country, for people watching online, I'm referring to America. America has inspired freedom-loving people across the world with respect to what they need to do to get to dignity, to get to freedom, to get to their independence. And the steps that this country took in 1776, we the people deciding for ourselves, not for King George, is the same inspiration that drove the people of Ambazonia on the 22nd of September, on the 1st of October, to say, as those 13 colonies said in 1776, we will not be slaves to King Biya. We will restore the independence of Ambazonia. And we had big celebrations across Ambazonia. We know what happened. The regime, which is desperate to keep our people in slavery, responded with a heavy hand. And if we remember just the first report of just the first day of peaceful demonstrations to celebrate independence, the first thing that came through was 121 people killed. Some of them killed from helicopter gunships. So the government didn't go out, I take that back, it's not a government. The regime didn't go out to try and, settle anything, discuss anything, dialogue on any matter. It was just about killing. And this 121 was established by a parliamentary report. And that parliamentary report did not allow members of parliament to even visit the victims. So this is a conservative estimate, and all other numbers that I show in this slide are conservative estimates of people killed. But that was day one, 121 people killed. Fast forward to the end of November 2017. So this is exactly 2 months from the 1st of October when our people declared our independence restored. Mr. Biya, whom I can now call Paul Biya, B. Hitler, B. Mvondo. He decided, well, I'm going to declare war. And he went on national TV. All of us remember. There's something that was very coordinated with respect to Mr. Biya. Mr. Biya famously calls himself the best pupil of the French president. And a day before he declared war, he was in meetings with President Emmanuel Macron of France. And when he declared war on Ambazonia, we have to presume that it was at the directives of Mr. Emmanuel Macron. It was with his full knowledge and backing and support. But there were some things that he said when he declared war. He called our people secessionists, which is supposed to be a crime. He called them terrorists, which is supposed to be a crime. He called them rebels, which is supposed to be a crime. And then his own government, his entire government went out there and said, these people were rats. He called us roaches. They called us dogs. They said we were the enemies within. And they said we were a lot worse than Boko Haram terrorists. These were the words they used. And on the day immediately following the declaration of war, there was a broadcast on radio in the direction of the 16 villages in Manu, where the first acts of war were going to be perpetrated. And that announcement, official announcement from the government, told all of our people to escape to safer ground, they said, within 24 hours. Because if they stay put, they will be taken for terrorists. And that's exactly how our people have been treated from the moment of the first shot being fired in this war. So Mr. Biya's government didn't even try to hide it. They were very clear from the very beginning. They took a pledge to commit war crimes. We will target civilians if the civilians stay put. And they have done that. And they've done it, I could say, very, very well. 15,000 plus killed. Again, a conservative estimate. The picture you have there is one that I like for everyone to see. It's a picture of young men rounded up, executed. And as villagers gathered and started sending these pictures around, Mr. Biya's government decided, you know, we really don't want this to be seen. And they showed up with gallons of fuel, poured the gallons of fuel on these young men and burned the bodies up. There are over 200,000 refugees right now. OCHA has said this is the biggest mass displacement conflict anywhere in Africa. It's also the most underreported conflict in the continent. Now, we're talking refugees, but there's more to this conflict. There's 2.6 million internally displaced persons at this moment. People who are, you know, who are hiding in the bush, looking for safe haven, running away from the soldiers, hiding in the forest. There are over 1 million children who are out of school for a third year right now. And at least, conservative estimate, at least 500,000 children under the age of 10 have witnessed some form of atrocity, some form of war crime, including rape, including extrajudicial execution, including dismemberment, beheadings. So we say, what's going on in Ambazonia? These crimes border on genocide. We recognize them to be genocidal violence. Chris, a moment ago, was mentioning the most recent ones, the massacres in Gabu, the massacres in Small Babanki. The target is civilians. And if this were a war, even in the world wars, there were prisoners of war. Mr. Biya regime has never taken a prisoner of war. Not one has ever been presented. Everybody has been executed. And so it's a very important detail, and these pictures are just a small collection of them. It's a scorched earth policy that consists entirely, if farmers have their crops growing, and our people are largely farmers that survive mostly in rural areas based on agriculture, their crops have been destroyed, their stockpile of harvest of grain has been burned up in their homes, and they have been cut off from any kind of supply coming in from humanitarian assistance. It is to the point that the regime of Mr. Biya has targeted passenger planes and shot at passenger planes for the sole purpose of preventing the United Nations from delivering assistance to people. Who says it is genocide? Well, all of us Ambazonians say it is genocide, but it is even stronger that even more authoritative voices have said so. And there's none other than Kofi Annan defining it very clearly. People, you recognize that it is genocide when people are killed for who they are, not for what they have done. And the people of Ambazonia are getting killed for who they are, not for what they have done. Nobody in Ambazonia has committed any crime except to say that we are not Cameroonians, we are Ambazonians. The other person, and that will be the picture of the gentleman with the red sweater and the gray jacket, that is Professor Greg Stanton. Professor Greg Stanton is a US citizen. He's the president of Genocide Watch. He is the first person who recognized that what was going on in Rwanda in 1994 was genocide. And when he said it was genocide, the world hesitated, the world did not believe. He has already said that what is going on in Ambazonia now is genocide. And again, the world is hesitating. The Catholic bishops, the most powerful, perhaps non-governmental organization anywhere in Africa, have said it is genocide. Adama Dieng, the gentleman in the gray suit below the bishops, is the genocide prevention expert for the United Nations. And he has said it is genocide. The gentleman, the lawyer, Charles Taku, Barrister Charles Taku, is prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. He has said it is genocide. And Jan Egeland from the Norwegian Aid has said this is exactly what's going on. So how did we get here? We cannot forget, our people have a 100 plus years of colonial history, domination. People have been trying to take over our country for all of that land, all of that period. But if we only stay with the ones that happened in just the last century, we will remember that in 1953, our people put an end to colonial domination under Nigeria, and we pulled back to Ambazonia, started and ran our own government from 1954 to 1961, and the people who were self-ruling in 1961 were returned to a system of colonization in 1961. In August 1959, the only conference that was held in Ambazonia to determine what our people wanted, the Mamfe Conference, established very clearly that what we wanted was independence, but they would not let us have it. A UN plebiscite, it's titled the United Nations Independence Plebiscite for the people of Southern Cameroon, held on the 11th of February 1961. And the United Nations recognized that the will of the people had been expressed for independence, but also for some form of association, two states equal in status with La République de Cameroun. And that independence was supposed to be effective on the 1st of October 1961. But what happened instead, unlike anywhere else, the instruments of government were turned over from the British to the government or the regime of neighboring Cameroon. So the independence did not happen. So what we have are two countries that are perfectly divided, that are perfectly divisible, and that need to be divided anew. The world should stop this whole thing about Cameroon being a united country, or the repetitions that we keep hearing about. There's a certain Cameroonianness about Ambazonians, because, you know, I know how close the people of the United States are with the people of Canada, but I've never seen the Canadianness of the American people. Nor have I seen the Mexicanness of American people. So the people of Ambazonia really do just want independence. And independence is justified because they have been recognized as a people with a territory, with a government. They deserve independence. Now, I will not go reading through those, the Universal Declaration, Article 3, Article 76 of the UN Charter, which essentially said all territories were to be prepared for independence. Now, it's important because in 1919, it is in 1919 that the United Nations said that Southern Cameroon was ready for independence. And then in 1961, they were like, you're ready to join that other country. And that absolutely does not stand. And Cameroon is in violation not only of international law, but also of certain aspects of the African Charter, which are mentioned there, Article 4B. I don't want to keep this too long. But there are a number of steps that were taken to ensure and enforce annexation of this country. 2 states equal in status, and for a long time, Amadou Ahidjo, the then president of La République du Cameroun, recognized that every time he was in Boya, every time he was anywhere in southern Cameroon, he had no business meddling in the internal affairs of southern Cameroon. And he said that in his own speeches, which we can find. He had also taken a commitment before the United Nations indicating, never will we annex these people. We are not an annexationist people. But essentially, they prevented multipartism. They set up an oppressive tyranny that folded the people into submission, and they ensured that the people of Ambazonia would submit, which we have not. Now, what solutions can be offered? There's one that we promise the world. The people of Ambazonia will stay mobilized. In the face of all kinds of tyranny, they have stayed mobilized. And so Mr. Biya may think that he's got a war here to win. The people of Ambazonia are not interested in winning a war. We're interested in winning independence. And he can win all the wars he wants. He will not win our people. He will not break our resolve. He will not break our resilience, and our people will triumph. Now, if you want a solution, you've got to think about, for the people, the most pressing needs now are humanitarian convoys, getting to our people, providing them the help that they need in places where they are, because very many of them are exposed to too many dangers. Then you can then think about a force of interposition. You can think about creating a trusteeship territory manned by United Nations peacekeepers. Then at that point, you will create a divide and a buffer zone between the two forces. Because it should be very clear, the people of Ambazonia will never, ever disarm. Not again. After we've seen what happens to us when we don't carry weapons, we will never, ever do that again. Now, what is happening in Ambazonia is very familiar for anyone who's followed international politics, because that's exactly what Iraq tried to do with Kuwait. Kuwait was supposedly a part of Iraq. I mean, everything used to be a part of Iraq, maybe, but they decided we're just going to invade, we're going to occupy, we're going to take over. And the world did the right thing in the case of Kuwait. They went out, they set up a Gulf War to make sure that Kuwait would be free, and that's important. Now, there was the occupation by Indonesia of Timor-Leste. It lasted for as long as it lasted, but when the people rose, it was possible for them to take it over. Now, this occupation by Cameroon is no different from the occupation that Morocco is rolling out now in the Western Sahara. And if the world is not in agreement with respect to Russia occupying Crimea, they cannot be in agreement with La République du Cameroun occupying southern Cameroon. Now, one thing that this is not a minority issue, and it is not a linguistic issue. As much as we suffer a form of linguistic apartheid that no one else suffers anywhere in the world, but it is not a minority issue. This is a territorial dispute between two countries. This is an identity crisis between a people who have, in keeping with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, have said, we reject whatever nationality you wanted to give us. We advocate our own nationality, the one with which we're born. And it is different from other territories that were integrated into other countries. And I'll take a few examples here. Tanganyika was integrated into Tanzania. they did not obtain independence. They did not do what our forebears said, which is, we are not going to just merge into another country. Togoland was integrated into Ghana, and the people of Togoland did not obtain independence. The people of Ambazonia said, no, we are not going to do such a thing because we already experienced that in Nigeria, and we're not going to let it happen. The people of Puerto Rico integrated the United States. They did not obtain independence before integrating in the United States. And so our case is a very simple case of annexation. And if any one of the 13 colonies, original colonies here in the United States, could take over another one, so if Maryland could just walk into Delaware and say, you know, everything here in Wilmington, you guys just listen to us, we're in charge. If that were to be allowed, even in the days when there were the 13 colonies, then that's what Mr. Bier is asking for. Now, the world has very little appetite for new countries, and we can understand that. But this is not a new country. Hello? This is an old country that was stolen. And we want the world to recognize that even in the case where this was a union, unions fail, unions collapse. And there are a series of examples around the world of these unions that have collapsed and countries have been able to go forward. The union between Senegal and Gambia has not survived. It did not survive the test of time, and so they could go their different ways. The union between Syria and Egypt did not stand up, and the two countries broke away. They went their separate ways. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics did not survive, and the countries broke apart and went their separate way. The union between Eritrea and Ethiopia did not work for reasons that we know. And Sudan and South Sudan did not work. So it's not about telling our people, you just suck it up, just stay there. That's not what can happen. Now, the most important thing is I believe that everyone can help, all of you, including those of you online. Because today, and our lawyers will announce in a short while, we are beginning a major other step. Because this war of independence is fought on the diplomatic front. It will be fought very strongly on the legal front, and our people will persist and resist until we get independence. So it will be fought on the ground on the basis of self-defense as well. So we will protect our people. So we are here today to launch a major campaign. How can we build a major reservoir of support for the push for independence among politicians, among diplomats, in the White House, in Congress, across the globe? How can we build it in the press corps? How can we build it in civil society organizations? In short, how can we internationalize this crisis? The people of South Africa for a long time under apartheid fought on their own. The world did not listen. But when the world turned on their transistor and started listening to the voices from out of South Africa, they understood the plight of the people of South Africa. And that is what we have to do when we start internationalizing this crisis right now. Because we know what the end game is, because our people have written the end of this film. Our people have said, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how long it takes us. We are going to Boya. Independence is our final destination, and there's no stopping us. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Bo. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. If our case was meant for the courtrooms, wouldn't we be in Ambazonia today, having our own country and leading our own country? But unfortunately, that is not how world politics works. And we have then to take the long route that we are taking today. When this conflict started, we carried palm fronds to the streets, demanded just peace. Then, La République did not listen. They called us names, declared war, and then we in turn decided to take up arms to support ourselves, to defend our people, and to defend our territory. That was a major front that was for the first time launched in the course of fighting for the independence for the Southern Cameroons. So today, as Comrade Bo has just stated, this is another major front that is being launched here today. Not only will the Ambazonians hear this, but the international community is now going to hear from us at the International Criminal Court. And again, not only La République is going to hear us, the international community will hear us. So we are taking another front besides the armed struggle in which we are now engaged in. It is for that reason we have these two gentlemen here with us from, what's the law firm again? Fine and the Valley. It is for that reason we have them here from the law firm Fine and the Valley. They will present to us today their mission and exactly how they are going to go about it. And I think every Ambazonian should mark this day because it's a historic day. It's a historic day for Ambazonia to be formally taking La République du Cameroun to the International Criminal Court. It's a groundbreaking event. And so, sir, thank you very much for coming. I will give you the microphone to brief our people what message you would like them to know, and the international world too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there are any Paul Biya spies in the audience, they could stand up. I'm disappointed since they might learn something, because we have a message for Paul Biya. Remember, Libya's Colonel Gaddafi was indicted for genocide and crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. We know what his fate was. Omar Bashir of Sudan was also indicted for crimes against humanity and genocide. We know where he is. And I would suggest Cameroonian President Paul Biya should learn by those examples. It's altogether fitting, I believe, that this program is being held here at the National Press Club, in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., because I think the themes that justify the independence of Amazonia were articulated in the United States over 200 years ago, the Declaration of Independence. And perhaps its most momentous phrase was that it's not only the right, but it's the duty of every people who witness a government seeking to reduce them to absolute despotism, to rise up, overthrow, and change that form of government for a substitute that promises to secure their inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I want to underscore the duty, not the right, the duty to overthrow despotism. And those words rang like a hammer on an anvil throughout all of the world at the time and shook the foundations of every tyranny all throughout Europe and Asia. And that's the message I think we want to send to President Biya, that we will be undertaking whatever efforts, whatever resources, whatever stamina is needed to ensure that you do not reduce Amazonia to absolute despotism, that Amazonia achieve its rightful place in the family of democratic nations that subscribe and practice the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Before I enter into a menu of initiatives that we anticipate, I want to underscore why this effort by Amazonia to attain independence is not at all hopeless. It may be long. The long march was long. But in contemporary times, there are dozens of examples where peoples who have been subject to the most cruel barbarities have attained independence irrespective of when borders were drawn. And we can think of Bangladesh, Montenegro, Kosovo, Namibia, Eritrea, South Sudan. It goes on and on and on. And there is no justification for withholding that same right or remedy from Ambazonia, who, as the slideshow witnessed, is every bit as much stricken by these horrors and unspeakable barbarities as has been witnessed since World War II, razing hundreds of cities and villages, burning women, children, totally and completely without remorse. The only reason why, in my judgment, it's received less publicity is because Mr. Biya has the protection of the French military, the French president, Mr. Macron. And because of the French prominence, he's able to shield Cameroon from the sunshine of publicity that would shock the conscience of the world if they could witness the ongoing horrors. And of course, there's nothing at all unusual about independence votes, even short of that degree of oppression. You may recall recently Scotland voted on whether they should be independent of Great Britain. Quebec voted on whether they should be independent from largely English-speaking Canada. Those were free and unmolested votes. Both of them failed, but they may occur again. So this is a time-honored understanding that every people, including pursuant to United Nations General Assembly, decolonization resolutions, have a right to chart their own destiny through self-determination, which certainly has been denied Ambazonian people. So what do we anticipate in the future? And I mean that very short future. One effort that's been alluded to earlier is filing a petition with the International Criminal Court in The Hague that will charge not only Mr. Biya, but Mr. Macron himself and numerous of their subordinates in the French military and the Cameroon military with genocide and crimes against humanity. The chronicle of horrors is in the public domain. Some of it will be retrieved through affidavits. Those who fear retaliation need the protection of anonymity. But the International Criminal Court, once a charge is filed, there's an obligation on all signatories to assist in the investigation. And we believe this should concentrate the minds wonderfully of Mr. Biya to cease these horrors and to negotiate quickly some kind of amicable resolution of the division of Cameroon between the English-speaking southern Cameroons and the French-speaking north. What happens at the International Criminal Court is after a complaint is filed, it is examined by the chief prosecutor, Mr. Bensanudu. She's from Gambia, is educated in Nigeria. And then there are 3 judges who would then examine the evidence. If there's reasonable cause to believe these horrors have been perpetrated, then the investigation goes into full gear, and ultimately there would be a trial before a tribunal of 15. And I want to underscore principles of international law that Mr. Biya and Mr. Macron, among others, should know about. It's the doctrine of command responsibility, supervisory responsibility. Simply because Mr. Biya or Mr. Macron are not actually pulling the trigger, lighting the match, wielding the machete, doesn't mean they're not criminally culpable. If they have supervisory or command control over those who are committing these crimes, they are every bit as much culpable as the actual wrongdoers themselves, just like Slobodan Milosevic was culpable for all the horrors committed by his Serbian subordinates, whether in Srebrenica or otherwise. We also think that an initiative before the International Court of Justice, oftentimes called the World Court, is appropriate. It also sits in The Hague, and it entitles nations to sue each other claiming treaty violations. And it's altogether proper for Ambazonia to assert itself as an independent nation and sue Cameroon. Among other things, they flagrantly violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and it would be a forum in which we can test the legitimacy of independence of Ambazonia from Cameroon by forcing the court to recognize our standing as a party in a jurisdiction where only nations have standing to sue and complain. In addition, in the United States, we have several vehicles to move forward to sanction and to cast sunshine on the horrors perpetrated by Mr. Bia and his henchmen. We have something called the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, where we'll seek a listing of all those in Cameroon as well as in France who are complicit in violating internationally recognized fundamental human rights. And once you're listed and the decision is made by the President in consultation with Congress and the Secretary of State, you're denied visas, your assets are frozen, and you are stigmatized. And that's something that we will work very diligently on with the Congress of the United States. There is addition that we can seek to impose economic sanctions on countries that are complicit in a systematic violation of human rights. Deny aid from the World Bank, from the International Monetary Fund, deny any special trading privileges under AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and further, what's critical in my mind, we need a military arms embargo. That is being imposed in Libya. We know that in Cameroon, the military training and weapons that are used purportedly against international terrorism is turned directly on the people of Ambazonia. Mr. Bia is engaged in warfare against his own people. And it's a true, I believe, mark of civilized behavior that the Ambazonians are fighting in self-defense. They're not picking civilian targets to retaliate against, but every person, every human being has a right to live. And if you're attacked, you have a right to kill your attacker if your life, serious limb is threatened. We also will be engaged in the process of drafting a constitution for the nation of Ambazonia that reflects the highest and best from the United States and other experience, to show that, no, we don't want a system that imitates Paul Bia, where he is the beginning and end of everything. He holds elections and he decides who the winner is. I mean, can you ever concede something more fraudulent than that? He even takes Vladimir Putin and President Xi in China to a new level. You vote, but he chooses who wins, whoever, respective of who the vote's for. So we want to make certain a constitution is a nation's birth certificate. It's kind of your calling card for the rest of the world. And it needs to be explained in a way that's approachable to the people. This is why we are adopting separation of powers, checks and balances. We don't want any group to be endowed with authority to oppress anyone else. Each group, each individual gets to march to their own drummer in a peaceful way, seeking fulfillment in what they find is their salvation on earth. It's also very important, in my judgment, that we seek allies. I can't and won't identify them now, but we need to recognize that, unfortunately, international law, international relations is not driven so much by philosophy, but by ulterior motives. Countries have interests. They do things because they believe they'll benefit economically, militarily. Well, what's in it for me? They're not in the business of altruism. Have you ever heard of a country saying, we practice philanthropy, right? Doesn't happen. So we need to be shrewd in finding, all right, who can we find out there? They may not like Macron. There may be things that Bia is doing that they find objectionable as well. New future allies with an independent Ambazonia. Perhaps you would negotiate treaties with the United States, free trade agreements, maybe station AFRICOM there, all sorts of things that can be done to create incentives for those to say, yes, now there's something in it for me. Ambazonia has independence. We know right now, for example, huge point of resistance of the French to independence is all their economic investments in Ambazonia go out the window. So they'll fight to retain that. We need to make allies with people who would come in and replace them. All right, now I see this is an advantage for us. Anyway, all of these things have to be dealt with on a very granular basis because you're dealing with the ulterior motives that are not high-minded. But we have to be willing to go there. if we just claim we're entitled to it because of justice. It's unfortunate but true. Well, good. Go ahead, eat justice for lunch. Is that going to prevent Mr. Bia from slaughtering you? No, it's not. It doesn't mean that in our individual lives we want to renounce idealism, no. But after all, we're talking about the fates of millions of people. And we don't want to make them martyred to a cause simply because we don't want to get our hands dirty. Obviously, we're not going to resort to violence other than self-defense. But those are the kinds of things that we have to accept. Finally, I want to remind all in the audience is that we can't necessarily control the speed of our destiny. We know ultimately we will have Amazonia independence if we're resilient and we're persistent. But there are a whole host of flukish, odd things that happen in politics that accelerate or retard the speed with which things happen. We don't control all of those. So when you sign up, think of a climb of Mount Everest. We're kind of at the bottom of Mount Everest. We're going to get to the top. Now, maybe if we have a helicopter, we get there faster. But we have to be willing, if necessary, to climb it all ourselves too, and it will make the destiny all the more glorious. And I think, finally, the wisdom of our founding father, Benjamin Franklin, will do us all well. During the period in which we were fighting for our independence from Great Britain, he reminded all who were divided at the time, if we don't hang together, we'll all hang separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We are very, very excited to hear what you are telling us here today. We see this struggle moving to a whole different level. Before we move to the question and answer session, I will invite Mr. Diwali. Am I correct?
That's it, yes, Diwali.
Thank you, sir. Please come over and speak to us.
Thank you. Okay, let me just close it. Hello, my name is W. Bruce Devalier, and I'm with the law firm of Fine and Devalier with my law partner, Bruce Fine. And it is an honor to be here. I say that a lot. I don't always mean it. Today, I really mean it. There are rare occasions in anyone's life when you have an opportunity to do something that involves justice. Hopefully, as a lawyer, I get to do that fairly often. It almost never happens to anyone. Very few are called to secure justice for an entire people, an entire nation. Everyone watching out there, both Ambazonians and non-Ambazonians, needs to understand there is hope. There is something you can do. There are things that will be done, and there is hope. And at the end of the tunnel, independence will be secured. Of that I am confident. Because why? Because it is right. Ambazonians in this room, Ambazonians watching, Ambazonians the worldwide, all they want is very simple. They want what they had. They want independence. They want freedom. Seldom in the world is a nation that is free, a place that is free, that is granted its independence, just get taken. Stolen like a thief in the night steals a baby, and no one does anything. That's what happened here. This hope comes from the past, from the present, and the future. And I want to look a little bit at the past because I think most people don't really understand what I'm talking about when I say all you really want is what you had. And when I look at the past, and when we look at the past, one of the problems with looking at the past is you point your finger, you indict someone, you make them feel guilty. And sometimes that's not the way to get people to do what you want them to do. And make no mistake about it. When someone asks me what I do for a living, I say, I try to get people to do things they don't want to do. Jurors don't want to be there generally. Judges, it's their job, but they don't want to choose my side. We're trying to get Bia and Macron Cameroon, and France to do something they don't want to do. And how do you do that? Well, if you're lucky enough to have the power of truth, the power of justice, the power of God, and the power of a belief in something that's greater than all of us, then you have truly a powerful weapon to achieve your ends. And so if we look back in the past, we're pointing a finger. And I submit to you, we're pointing a finger of the wrongs that have been occasioned to the people of Ambazonia. But we're also pointing a finger toward the future. Ambazonia, indeed Cameroon as it exists today, is a house built on sand. And as Matthew pointed out, the parables of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew from the Sermon on the Mount, a house built on sand cannot stand. How great will be the fall. I'm not sure everyone knows, so I'm going to go into something that all of you know, that Ambazonia was also known as Southern Cameroon. It's currently the English-speaking section of the predominantly French-speaking Cameroons. The population is home between 6 to 8 million people. I think the BIA government wants everyone to believe there's only 6 million people so they can make sure 2 million people don't get to vote. Not that voting matters anyway. So it's 25% of the population of the present-day Republic of Cameroon. Yet more than 60% of the GDP of the Republic of Cameroon comes from Ambazonia. Therein hangs the tale. The wealth of the Cameroons is in Ambazonia. Not just in the oil, the timber, the minerals, but in the people, the hardworking, the industrious people of Ambazonia. This is not a situation where, like South Sudan, where there's an effort to gain freedom for a group of people that simply can't support themselves or have no ability to govern themselves. Ambazonians have been governing themselves for hundreds of years. They had perhaps the first democratic election in Africa, transition of power through a democracy. They had a written constitution many years ago, centuries ago. So initially, the United Nations, they sanctioned the creation of 2 states of equal status in Cameroon. What was known as Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia, and the French-speaking Cameroon. Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia speaks English. The Republic of Cameroon speaks French. French Cameroon gained its independence from France. Some would suggest it's never really been independent from France. France has this remarkable thing it does with its colonies. It says you're free, but come here, I want to hug you. And they hug them so closely, they almost die. They control the money, they control the trade. They make sure the French military is always garrisoned there. So that was January 1st, 1960. And the British trusteeship territory of the Southern Cameroons was created on 1st of October in 1961. And immediately, and herein lies the tale of the illegitimacy of Cameroon. The people of Ambazonia, of Southern Cameroons, were given a choice. They were given 2 choices. Do you want to be part of Nigeria, or do you want to be part of Cameroon? And the people of Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon, go, wait, what about this other thing? Us being independent, because we're independent. We're our own deal. Well, that was never really offered to them by the UN, and there's a lot of reasons that aren't really clearly explained, but mostly because the British ambassador didn't think it was such a good idea. That was a bad idea. So what happened was they were forcibly annexed into French Cameroon in 1961, but they had their own prime minister. The Ambazonians had their own prime minister. They had their own government. They even had their own star on the flag of Cameroons. There were 2 stars. Now, good luck finding that flag, because something's happened to that flag. There's now 1 star. So it was 2 nations coming together to form 1 country, reluctantly. So after this forcible annexation, beginning in 1971, 1972, the French-speaking government of the Federal Republic of the Cameroon, unilaterally, they abolished the federation. There was this wonderful constitution that was created.
in 61. It shared power. Territorially, there was a sharing of power. There was Southern Cameroons, there was Ambazonia, and then there was French-speaking Cameroons. There was English-speaking Cameroon, French Cameroon. They shared power. Institutionally, they shared power in the executive, in the judiciary, and in the legislature. And the executive power was shared by the president and each of the state prime ministers. And the legislative power was shared by the state deputies and the federal deputies. There was always a guarantee for security. They were able to conduct themselves as two nations. And in the Constitution, it became known as the Fumban Accord. They arrived at a complete accord, and it was remarkable at the time for the world, and certainly remarkable for Africa. It was a written constitution that shared power and seemed to be fair. They even went so far as to change their identities. French-speaking Cameroon became East Cameroon. English-speaking Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon, became West Cameroon. Once again, you can find old globes and old maps that show you this. It's the nation of West Cameroon, the nation of East Cameroon. Good luck finding those, because they've been abolished. They've been wiped off the face of the earth. The Constitution had a very interesting provision in Section 47, and that was very clear that if you wanted to amend the Constitution of these two nations together, you had to have a majority. There were 5 votes for West Cameroon, the English-speaking, Southern Cameroons, Amazonia, and there were 5 votes for the French-speaking. The only way the Constitution could ever be amended was if everyone agreed to it. Something happened in 1971. There was a referendum, well, actually the referendum of 20th of May of 1972, that essentially abolished the Constitution, abolished the fundamental basis that the UN approved of the creation of this joining of two nations, the freedom and independence, was abolished unilaterally. There was no vote. Parliament never voted on it. There was a proclamation was issued. It was DF 72-270. It abrogated the original Constitution in whole cloth. It abrogated the accord, the very essence of the agreement of how these two nations came together. And it imposed a secret unilateral constitution. And that secret unilateral constitution said, we're ending the government. And it was a gentleman by the name of Ahijo, the first dictator. And he says, I'm in charge. It's my government. It's a military junta. There will be no parliament. There will be no courts, unless I say so, for 1 year. And then we're going to form a new government. And there's only going to be one Cameroon. And it's not hard to figure out what happened next. The majority, 75 to 80% of the people that spoke French became Cameroon. And the people that spoke English in Ambazonia became a colony. And I don't use that word lightly. Mr. Bowe and I had an exchange of emails where I said, well, I kind of object to that a little bit. I'm not sure you can say they're a colony, but the more you look into the definition of a colony, it's where one nation occupies another nation for their own purposes and subjugates them as though they were slaves. And that's what happened to South Cameroon. That's what happened to Ambazonia. They became the slaves. They became the colony. All of the powers were put in the hands of the president. All of them. The president, now Biya, he gets to be the federal government. He gets to choose the leaders of the state government. He gets to choose the leaders of the local government. He gets to decide, even after elections, who wins. He gets to decide who the ministers are. He gets to decide who the speaker is. He gets to decide how the legislature is composed. And elections have become just a mere ritual. So what I want people out there to start understanding is this just isn't right. This is wrong. And that's why you should help, because we're correcting a wrong. And the wrong just keeps getting worse. It just keeps getting worse. What we had was a revolution. It was a coup d'etat. It was a coup d'etat by the presidency. Biya became president through a coup d'etat. He destroyed a constitutional government and created a dictatorship right under everyone's noses. French didn't say a word. Sadly, the English didn't say a word. Now, there was a lot going on in 1971 and 72 throughout Africa. There were wars in Egypt, there were wars in Israel, there was war in Vietnam, but no one said a thing. Everyone stood silent. That's what you can't do. You can't be silent. The time for silence is past. So today's government, today's institution, today's system, all comes from this junta, this coup d'etat, this overthrow, this military-type takeover from a beautiful, imperfect, but still constitutional government, the rarest of things in Africa. So anyone that says, and I know they're going to say it, oh, well, the Ambazonians, they're not capable of governing themselves. They don't know what to do. It'll just be another southern Sudan, another South Sudan. They're wrong. The people of Ambazonia know what a constitution is. They know what it means to govern themselves. They know what justice means. They know the importance of justice. They know the importance of independence and liberty, because that's what they're asking for now. And they're not asking for it just to get what they want, to scurry along and create another despotic regime. I firmly believe that everyone in this room, everyone sitting at this table, and everyone out there is committed to making Ambazonia the shining star of Africa, fulfilling the promise that has never been fulfilled of the post-colonial Africa, the promise of Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and the other great leaders. It can be done, and we're going to do it. So you ask yourself, how is it possible that all of this could have happened and no one has recognized that Ambazonia is free and independent, that it's a thing, that it exists? Well, they have. They are, the junta of Biya and its predecessor has gone from one illegality to another, one illegitimacy to another. Keep putting on additions and building higher on that house of sand that Jesus tells us through Matthew. Cannot stand. It's now being governed as a colony because it has never been legitimately annexed. It is not legitimately absorbed. And I submit to you that Cameroon, as it exists today, isn't a legitimate nation. President Biya in 1992 himself acknowledged Ambazonia's existence. In a case, it was the Bamenda High Court case HCB 28/92. He agreed. Additionally, President Biya, some of you may remember, it's funny how these conflicts come and go. A huge thing in the mid-early 2000s, the Bokassa conflict with Nigeria. Well, actually, it was in the early 90s with Sani Abacha, who isn't getting a lot of good press these days. But when that conflict with Nigeria was resolved, Paul Biya signed a treaty, a UN treaty, in front of God and everybody in the UN that said the following. Let me quote. I, President Paul Biya of the Republic of Cameroon, in a bid to provide lasting peace to the Bokassa conflict, do hereby commit myself and my government to respect the territorial boundaries of my country as obtained at its independence. Cameroon's independence was obtained January 1st, 1960. Ambazonia wasn't a part of Cameroon in January 1st, 1960. Ambazonia was still part of Nigeria for a few months and then free. So Paul Biya promised in a treaty, and this is important, I'm going to pull back to where I should be, where my country could be, because he is French, so clearly he says, l'état c'est moi, the state is me. Paul Biya is Cameroon. Cameroon is Paul Biya. I'm going to pull back, and this is where we're going to be. And the UN believed him because they sent surveyors out and they built these giant pillars that are on the border between Ambazonia and French-speaking Cameroon. So if for a moment you think that there's no legitimacy to this claim, there's a fence. Pretty close to a fence anyway. There's a wall separating Ambazonia, the free and independent nation of Ambazonia, from French Cameroon. And I found out something today, speaking with His Excellency, the President. I find this stunning, and I hope people that are listening and watching today think about what I'm about to say, the gravity of this. If you live in Ambazonia, if you're an English-speaking resident of Ambazonia, and you cross the Mungo River, if you cross into French Cameroon, you have to go through a security checkpoint. You have to present documents, and you have to pay customs on anything you bring back or take in. Just like if you're in Italy and you're crossing over to Switzerland. Just like you're in France and you're crossing into Portugal. It's not one country. They don't think for a minute it's one country. They know better. They're just not acting better because they have themselves a nice colony. And that cannot stand. That house of sand cannot stand, and how great will be that fall. Further, this may be a little unfair, but that's what lawyers do. We bring up unfair stuff. There's a really good chance Paul Biya isn't even legitimately the president of Cameroon under any international accords, any concept of international law, because what the Cameroonian Constitution says, that the National Assembly president becomes the head of state until the president is elected within 90 days. So when Ahijo resigned, what should have happened was the head of the National Assembly, the president of the National Assembly, should have become the president of Cameroon. Unfortunately, he was Ambazonian. His name was St. Muna. He should have been the president of Cameroon, and then there should have been an election. If anything happens when you have slaves or a colony, you don't let them lead you. So Biya appointed himself president, illegitimately. Illegitimately. How great was its fall when the house of sand, the house built on sand, came down. So you see, there is no basis for any argument against Ambazonia. You have to tell the truth if you're Cameroonian, or if you're on the side of the French-speaking Cameroonians. If you're Macron, before you go to bed at night, when he's not busy telling us how many plastic bottles we should use and standing on tables and cheering on soccer teams. He has to tell himself the truth. And the truth is, Ambazonia is the vassal state, the colony, the slave of Cameroon and of France. They're still a colony in West Africa. He has to tell himself that truth because no other truth will abide, because there is no other truth. Everything else is a lie, and it's been a lie every day for decades. That's the hope. How great will be the fall. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. It's deeply unfortunate. What I just told you, the history of the illegitimacy of this whole process, would be enough for independence. But there's an even greater thing that has happened. It is even more of a reason that everyone out there needs to join together for justice, for liberty, for independence, freedom, equality, and humanity. Now, Biya has embarked on a course of genocide, mass slaughter of innocents. He's not slaughtering his people. He's slaughtering civilians in a country that he has taken over. And they tend to be children. They tend to be beautiful children. And they tend to be women and young men. And they're all civilians because there's not an Ambazonian army. And there's this tendency, and I don't want to get too horrific or explicit here, but one of the powerful messages he sends to those that he's enslaved and colonized, the favored way of the militias, the security forces, and the military. And that's an amazing word, isn't it? Militia. That means anything. Anybody that you can pay to kill somebody, they're in a militia. And then you say it really wasn't me. And BS says, oh, it's really Ambazonians killing Ambazonians. And that's nonsense. But one of the favored ways, the horror-filled ways, one of the reasons I can't let my children look at my computer when I'm working on these files is because of the policy, is they like to wound the Ambazonian children and women and then burn them to death while they're still alive. And they burn their homes. There's been over 400 villages razed, leveled by fire. Or they do it in the streets. And why do they do it that way? And why do I say it's a favored tactic, not just an accident? Because they're sending a message. You shoot someone in the night or you shoot someone in the forest 200 feet away, no one really sees that unless they're standing with you or with the person that got killed. But if there are villages being burned and the horrible screams of people being burned alive, that gets heard, that gets seen, and the message is sent. And the message is very clear. The message is, your God isn't here to help you. I command you. I am the demon, the devil that can destroy you and will. Don't rise up against me. That is the message that Paul Biya is sending. And that is the message that I hope when President Macron, before he goes to bed at night, stops telling us how many plastic bottles to drink from, stops standing on tables rooting for his soccer team, who were primarily from Africa, but that's another story. I hope he understands that that's the real message that he's sending. It's not about plastic bottles or soccer teams. It's about children being burned to death just to preserve an illegitimate colony that should have never existed. There are over 2 million people that have been displaced. Many of them have crossed over and gone into Nigeria, which has its own problems. It's not exactly a great place to flee to. Things must be pretty bad if you look to Nigeria as a place where you can find peace and comfort and respite. And under the international law, it is, as Mr. Fine said, it is both the right and the duty of the people to throw off a government that is seeking to reduce them to absolute despotism, seeking to reduce them to slavery and to being a colony. And that politically defenseless minorities can escape oppression. And we have more than that here. It's not a minority, it's a separate nation that has been oppressed and enslaved. They've been murderously denied their internationally mandated rights. And if I haven't lost you with the horrible nature of the things I'm telling you, I hope you're still here because something can be done. We all need to do something. And just like when you go to church, just like Jesus said also on the Sermon on the Mount, good Lord, would my grandma be proud of me to know that I mentioned the Bible twice, 3 times today. You can give 3 things, your time, your talent, and your treasure. But you can't stand by. You can't stand by and just watch it happen and do nothing. That's not an option. We're talking about civilization. Mr. Fine mentioned the various avenues of redress, and I submit one that's very interesting to me. Not only the ICC, who we've appeared in front of, we have the fortune of one of the security guys there is from Florida like me, and the last time we were at the ICC, and he goes, hey, you're that Florida guy, how you doing? I said, you know, while it's good to be recognized by you, I'm not sure this is the best place to be recognized. He said, don't worry, the bad guys don't come through security. So it was a good deal. But the International Court of Justice, not really used that often. It's where nations get to sue nations based upon violations of treaties, accords, and promises. And I submit to you that I think we have 2 pretty darn good cases, maybe more, of the violation of the international accord, the Fumban Accord, the violation of the Constitution, the initial Fumban Constitution. That was an agreement that we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That was totally abrogated in 1972. And also the Bokassa Treaty, once again, Biya probably didn't know what he was doing. But he promised in front of the UN, in front of God and everybody, I'm pulling back Cameroon to where it was January 1st, 1960. That's the other side of the Mungo River. It doesn't include Ambazonia. So he needs to abide by that promise. And the International Court of Justice can do that. So I want to close by saying, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Fangom Gorji Dinka. I'm proud he's a lawyer. Not often lawyers do really good things. As I once told my grandma before she passed away, she said, it's going to be great to see you in heaven, Brucey. And I said, Grandma, I don't know. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to have to work extra hard. It's going to be real hard for me to get there. But he was a lawyer in his 1985 Declaration of Ambazonian Independence. Have some calling him the father of Ambazonia. And he's 93 now, I think. He's in exile. He's been arrested by Biya and tortured. He says, I'm not the father, God is the father. But he's the guy. But sitting at this table, sitting in this room, I am confident that the James Madison, the Thomas Jefferson of Ambazonia is in this room or sitting at this table or certainly in that audience, outside in the audience. There's going to be a constitution. And I am equally confident that not only will these people be, or whoever this is, be the James Madison or the Thomas Jefferson of Ambazonia, of Africa, because it's time to get it right. It's time that post-colonial Africa realizes the potential that it's had. And we don't go from one despotic dictatorship to the next, that we finally, the dignity of the greatness of the African people is recognized by their government. And I know that's going to happen in Ambazonia, because after all you've been through, so I pointed the finger in the past, the present, and the future. After all you've been through, you can't just restart this thing again, making it just like it was back then. And that's a promise everyone has made in this room. And that's a promise to the world. This forum was intended to explore the various aspects of the Ambazonian independence movement and the optimal, non-violent path to Ambazonian independence and the termination of the ongoing genocide of the people. All of the things that we're going to do as lawyers, that we're going to do, that we need your help, are all against the backdrop of stop killing my people. Independence, work toward it every day. But for now, they got to stop killing us. They got to stop killing my people. They have to stop killing the Ambazonians. And with all grace and humility, I say you're my people. Because once you got me, you got me. I get team haircut. I'm sort of like that bulldog. I have 7 speeds and 1 gear, only forward. So that is what we had hoped to do for you today. The thing that we cannot forget, however, is this isn't located somewhere in Africa involving some people in Africa that don't have anything to do with anybody else. This is a colony. This is enslavement. France has tacitly or actually approved what is going on here. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to hopefully, not to expose all of our strategies, but one understands from reading history that France and England haven't always been good friends. One understands England's going to do something in maybe another couple of months that'll involve not funneling money into France's pet, whatever it is their pets are, how many plastic bottles you can have, or their soccer team, whatever it is Macron does when he's not thinking about this. We believe Chatham House is a key. We believe that England can step forward and get it right and do the right thing and say, that's it, enough. You French people cannot keep killing English-speaking people. You can't do that. And we hope everyone that's watching this will say the same thing. Enough's enough. You need to stop. This house built on sand cannot stand. And how great will be the fall. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Fine and Mr. DeValle, for the services that your firm is putting at our disposal for the people of Ambazonia. We deeply appreciate that. Time is not on our side, I guess, and I want to believe we will now go straight to the question and answer session. The questions would be asked, and the appropriate person, if you want the lawyers to answer your question, please direct it to them. Or if you want any of the panelists here to take the question, direct it to the panelists. I see your hands up. I'm coming, please. Just give me 1 second. You know, I'm having the microphone. I have to answer the first question. Yes. So I start. Any other, Mr. Fine or DeValle can take the question. Ambazonians would love to know what is the level of your experience in cases such as this. Any of you can take the question. Where's the microphone? Okay, please.
At least three of my experiences, I think, relate to this. One, a long time effort in Cyprus, where the island remains divided between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. In fact, we did negotiate a confederal arrangement, and Turkish Cypriots voted for it, the Greeks did not, so they tore up the whole thing, and unfortunately it still remains divided. I also spent many years on the Kashmir issue. You know that India recently annexed at least the portion of Kashmir that was on their side of the line of control. Kashmir is similar in its background to Ambazonia because when the British abandoned India and there was supposed to be a plebiscite amongst the former chieftains as to whether they ought to be independent or join Pakistan or India, the United Nations just permitted becoming absorbed into Pakistan and India. Kashmir was never permitted to vote independence, and we see the results are rather bloody. The third case that I've been involved in is Sri Lanka, somewhat similar in that there the Tamil Hindu Christian minority being oppressed by the Sinhalese Buddhist majority. There was a terrible, terrible internal insurrection, the brutality that was utilized by Mr. Gotabaya and his brother, Rajapaksa, caused horrible suffering, 40,000 dead. It still remains a very convulsed nation. So I know it's not easy to accomplish the kind of political resilience and international pressure to achieve justice, but I know what's involved because I've been there at ground zero, at least 3 countries.
Thank you.
And I will say, Bruce Fine, Mr. Fine, my partner Bruce Fine, this is seldom, if ever, the case, but he's being modest. He has participated in the drafting of over 30 constitutions for 30 different nations. Together, we filed a TVPA, a Torture Victim Protection Act case, to avenge the murder of Igbos in Biafra. We have worked with the Igbo leadership to the extent it can be identified at any given moment in Nigeria. That's a problem. We have also filed ICC, International Court of Criminal Justice in The Hague, complaints against Buhari, against Nigerian generals. We filed one against, to avenge the death of Jamal Khashoggi, against Mohammed bin Salman, probably the most dangerous man in the world. So I'm not going to hear crow to you about how brave we are, but we don't. Remember the story about the bulldog? So we filed in front of the International Criminal Court. We know our way around there. As I said, the security guy knows us. So we've been blessed to have these opportunities, and we're hopeful to bring this experience and our depth of experience and how we do things. It's a 24-hour-day deal for us, and we're honored to represent the people of Ambazonia. And we do have experience in doing this. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, for the sake of time, I will appreciate if you can ask a question and not make a comment, and you have a maximum of 1 minute to ask your question, please. I will start from the senior barrister right here, Barrister John, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very beautiful presentation from my colleagues. My name is Barrister Fru. I have one question to ask, or two. Let me say two. The first one is, do you foresee jurisdictional problems when you file in the ICC? The reason why I ask is because the Rome Accord, Cameroon signed the Rome Accord, but they never ratified it. I think France signed and ratified. Now, you're bringing in beer and Macron. The question is, as it concerns beer, do you foresee jurisdictional problems in that court? And number two, my colleague here presented very succinctly the federal constitution, the so-called federal constitution. Did you know that that constitution was never presented to the Southern Cameroon Parliament or the West Cameroon Parliament for ratification before it became a constitution? Do you know that it was a constitution of La République de Cameroun that was transformed by decree by Mr. Ahijo and imposed on Ambazonia? Have you taken a look of Resolution 1608 of 21st April 1961 that the United Nations voted, and France did not vote did not vote that resolution? La République de Cameroun did not vote that resolution. The rest of French Africa, except Mali, did not vote. In that resolution, independence was given to the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. Now, if you read that resolution in its paragraph 5, you will come to understand that the paragraph 5 said, when the two trust territories get together, they will have to enter into an agreement regarding the policies that will be applied. In other words, a treaty implied. That never took place. Have you taken a look at that and see how it will impact your case? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I can answer this. Yeah. And we looked at 47 also. You guys can keep. Why don't you go ahead? I think you can hear it.
No, you need the mic for the for the video. Yes.
Let me just, before I pass this on the details of the resolution, which unfortunately resolutions are often honored in the breach rather than the observance. I know in Kashmir, the United Nations voted for a plebiscite in Kashmir, and India said, well, that's sorry, we got the arms and you don't, and now we're 70 years later and still haven't had anything. But putting that aside, I think our theory would be, as a conspiracy, France being a signatory to the International Criminal Court, there's a conspiracy between Macron and Biya and the French military and the Cameroonian military that would expose all of the participants to the International Criminal Court because one of the participants is a signatory. Secondly, there's an alternate vehicle to have established jurisdiction that's having a referral from the United Nations Security Council, which has happened on a couple of other occasions. So we know they'll make whatever arguments they can, but I don't think that's going to stop us from filing anything. But why don't you go ahead and, Bruce, now elaborate on the Constitution?
Well, also our filing against MBS. They're not signatories either, Saudi Arabia. So there have been examples where the ICC has found jurisdiction based upon the horrendous behavior. Gaddafi, as I recall, Libya was not a signatory. Then
And I'll just add that right now, the United States is being subject to examination in Afghanistan, although we never signed the International Criminal Court whatsoever. In fact, we threatened to go after the prosecutor for actually examining our war crimes in Afghanistan.
Right. So there is a jurisdictional concern, but it's one that we've addressed in previous filings, and the investigation continued forward. Yes, we have looked at the Constitution. I brought up Section 47, which is a little-known part, which said how you amend the Constitution. The part of my narrative of the imposition, the coup d'etat. Yes, it's 1608 and Resolution 1534. Both of those provide a basis, we believe, for bringing claims in the International Court of Justice, not just the criminal court. Okay. Two nations, conflict, written agreement, treaty. I believe that it's not a hard row to hoe to say, look, the Fumban Accord was a treaty. Two nations. They had an accord. They're going to come together. The Constitution that was born of that is also in the nature of a treaty. It's an agreement. So yes, we've looked at that, and we've looked at what the UN decided, which provides background and substance to those agreements. So I think it gets us in jurisdictionally into the International Court, which is different from the International Criminal Court. It's an actual trial procedure. So, but those are very, very good questions. You always have to think about your jurisdiction. We ran into some jurisdictional difficulties with the TVPA that everyone does, and right now we're currently working with other groups to amend the TVPA, to amend legislation, to get back to what Congress intended. And for those of you who don't know, it's the Torture Victims Protection Act. Congress decided in the early 80s that people that were killed or tortured under the color of another nation's laws could come to the United States and sue for damages, for redress of their grievances. Unfortunately, the courts have looked at that and said, well, I know what it says, but that doesn't mean you can come here and sue. We don't have jurisdiction over you. So we're going back to Congress, making Congress do what we don't think they have to do, but the courts are forcing us to make them do, which is to say, and all such claims can be brought in the U.S. district courts in any district in the United States. If we're successful in that, and we're hopeful to be, this is for, once again, for other groups, but the people of Ambazonia would be beneficiaries, where they could actually bring a lawsuit for damages against the people that have raised their village, murdered their children, murdered their wife, murdered their sons. Right now, we wouldn't advise filing a TVPA claim, because it's just, the courts are just not hospitable to them. But that tide will turn, because we have a pretty bad guy on the other side. Did I mention MBS? Yeah. Okay. It's Saudi Arabia is the bad guy that we're pushing against.
Yeah, we can piggyback a lot on Saudi Arabia.
On Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
All right. I'll come to you. Let me get to the second attorney here. Barrister Ambe, please.
Thank you, sir. My senior colleagues, my question is kind of a little nuanced but very direct. Have you, in your practice, all along, seen a situation where two countries came together to form a union, and the union ended up being a federation instead of a confederation?
Okay.
Have you seen a situation where two countries came together to form a new union, two independent countries came together to form a new union, and what came out of that new union was a federation instead of a confederation?
Well, I think that happened with, briefly with Syria and UAR.
Well, Nasser kept trying to make and unmake various and sundry arrangements. They never really had anything more than paper to back them. They never really moved forward substantively. I think the clearest example that relates to Ambazonia concerned with the decolonization, if you will, of Malaysia. Singapore initially voted to become part of Malaysia. Didn't work out because the Singaporeans were largely Chinese ethnics, and in Malaysia they were overwhelmed by the Malaysians. And so Singapore pulled out and restored its independence in 1965. And that's a similar kind of situation where we confront here. Now, you're asking, well, have two countries come together and voted to merge and then and establish a federation where they were previously independent?
Instead of a confederation? I think that's right, yes.
Oh, instead of a confederation, they became a single country. Like that?
No.
No, okay, I'm not.
I think
The question is
it possible for two independent countries to come together and the outcome is not a confederation, but instead a federation?
Well, Bruce, yeah, I mean, historically, the Turks and Caicos in America,
Yeah.
Texas was an independent nation. Texas became a state.
We had 13
Key West.
separate colonies were separate states, and they became a federation under the United States Constitution in 1787.
Key West was a country for a brief period of time.
But they were all sovereign before the Constitution.
okay.
And then they finally quit drinking for a while. And then they started in the United States. And then they started drinking again, now they want to leave. But yeah, it is possible. It is possible. Like I said, the Turks and Caicos, you see that possibly happening. Many would have it that Nigeria began with the three. There were three separate nations in Nigeria, and that was the intent. And that lasted for a little while until Ransi overthrew the government. But Nigeria was born of the idea of three separate nations based upon ethnicity and tribes. And that was what Nigeria was supposed to be, was three separate nations coming together to form one nation, or to form a federation. And it worked for a little while, but Nigeria did what Nigeria does, and the military took over.
In the United States, we permit, whenever they want, Puerto Rico to vote on independence, as opposed to becoming a nation. They've always voted, for whatever reasons, to stay in a Commonwealth status. But the votes are free and open. They campaign on that score, which is the way in which self-determination should be operating.
Barrister Ambe, did you have a particular reason for asking that question?
Yes. And thank you for letting me know. The essence why I asked the question is, it is my understanding that two independent countries coming together, had they formed a confederation, which is what the Soviet Union was, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic were, then we wouldn't have been in the position in which we find ourselves today when it comes to when we want to leave. The excuse that is being used by French Cameroon today and calling us part of their country is because of this twisted federation that my senior colleague here, Barrister Fru, explained to us about the constitution that they used in 1961, which was something that was imposed on us. Had we gone to sit down and form the agreement that was mandated by 1608, then the result of that agreement would have been a confederation. And that never happened. That's why practically my question was a follow-up to his, to make sure that as we move forward, we have that at the front of our head, that confederation never actually happened, and it was for a reason.
All right.
No, that followed into my narrative. I didn't want to get too much in the weeds, but yes, 1608 was disregarded, and once again, the House of Sand. I would caution, however, that if it were a confederation and you have one side with all the guns and the visceral ability to kill people for no reason, it doesn't matter what you call yourself. They're going to keep you if they need you, especially if you're 60% of the GDP. So I don't know that the use of the word confederation as opposed to federation would have been a magic bullet, but I get your point, and I think that can be added to the litanies of why this is all just illegitimate. It's just all a house built on sand. None of it makes any sense. None of it's real. None of it's defensible. Legally, morally, ethically, ethnically, it's just not defensible.
Let me just add, I think it processes everything here. I mean, the whole idea of self-determination is there's nothing magic about confederation or federation. It's whether the people who are governed by it agree to it. In the United States, I say when we moved from confederation to federation, we had conventions, special conventions in all 13 states were called. And they debated it, and they voted up or down. They voted yes, they wanted to create a federation, if you will, a federal government, but it came after free, open debate and elections. Well, what's wrong with that? They ought to be able to decide, just like, you can choose to be single, but if you want to get married, you can get married too. And that's what was defective in Cameroon and so much in Africa. They don't have any process by which this is done. Nigeria today lives under a constitution that was ordained by a military dictator in 1999. They never had any debate or any vote on it whatsoever. So how can you claim that's a constitution? So is Cameroon. Yeah, yeah, and Cameroon is similar. Although maybe they went through a little better theatrics than what was done in Nigeria. But that's the key here is the consent of the government.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yes, sir, Mola.
Thank you, distinguished attorneys. We are all aware of La Republique's propensity to corrupt and to corrupt absolutely. We did see them give Tibor Nagy a gold statue, Patricia Scotland a gold statue, all of these elements, intrigues of corruption to make them, do what La Republique wants. The question is, in fact, La Republique is using our wealth and resources to minimize us, to colonize us, to turn us into black-on-black colonization, session. To what extent can we believe that La Republique will not come after you guys and give you much more bigger money to delay or prolong this process? And granted that they won't do that, how long would this process take? How do you estimate that it would take how long? And another follow-up question would be, to what extent are you guys willing to help us come up with a currency distinct from the French franc in this process? Thank you.
Thank you.
That would happen quickly.
Yeah. we can put you on a dollarization program very fast, right? They have it already in Panama. They had it for a while in Argentina.
Okay.
So that's a possibility. Mm-hmm. Now, with regard to, all I can say is my whole life is testimony against Mr. Biya or any other tyrant bribing me, stealing my soul, making sure I would end up in perdition in 3 seconds. And if you don't trust me, then you shouldn't hire me. And I submit my whole life to scrutiny. With regard to the timing, I said, there are all sorts of flukish things we don't control in international politics that could make this happen, anywhere from 1 year to 5 years to 3.5. We don't know. Key element is the role of France, because they're critical at the higher levels. They sit in the Security Council. They can veto things that we'd like to have happen. And maybe Macron loses office. There may be some other deal that where he's able to get some kind of advantage and walks away from Cameroon. So to try to suggest that, well, this is a sprint rather than a marathon, well, hopefully, but we have to be prepared to run a marathon if we need to, because it's about not only the living, but those yet to be born. We cannot walk away and let them inherit the same horrors that are being witnessed every day in Cameroon. That is not an option.
Thank you.
I would say, as a true son of the Deep South, I'm not smart enough to be duplicitous. Once I'm on your side, I'm on your side, like a bulldog, like I said. And the way the conversation would go would be, okay, let's talk. Do you promise you'll stop killing the people? Okay, you stop killing the people? Good, you can keep your damn money. I'm not coming to work for you, but don't kill the people anymore. It will not happen. We have the requirements of our profession. We get disbarred if we switch sides, no matter how much money. And as I said, and I meant it when I said it, this is an opportunity that seldom comes, and I feel blessed, and I know my partner does too. If before you die, you get to give freedom or help in a small way, independence, freedom, dignity, justice to a people, you've lived a pretty good life. And that's what I want to do. That's why I started doing this. So I didn't go to law school because I couldn't count. I used to be an engineer. So I went to the law school to make the world a better place. And every morning when I drop my kids off at school, I say, make the world a better place. And it's not just words, I believe it. So love you guys, but I love my kids. And so I can't tell them to make the world a better place if I do something like that. But thank you for that question, because I understand that it has been a problem that whoever comes to help Ambazonia oftentimes gets co-opted into the bigger basket. There's no other basket for us. We're honored to work for you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, currency, that would be one of the first things that we would suggest. We did some work for another, well, Gabon. And one of the first things we said is, you guys have got to get on an international currency. You can't keep using the franc. You can't let the French continue to control your monetary system. That's what I meant by the hug. You know, you're with me. You're free, but you're with me, the hug that strangles and kills. It's the abusive relationship hug that the French do, and it's mostly through their currency. The first thing you got to do is you got to get away from the franc, get away from the French. There's a reason why France has all of that wealth. It's not coming from France. It's not from selling wine, and it's not from selling cookies. It's stolen from Africa still. I said it out loud. So they make a lot of money because you're on the franc. The first thing to do is to get off the franc and go on and get your own international currency. That would be one of my strongest pieces of economic advice. The very first thing.
Thank you.
And if you want to get in good stead with the international, the banking community, you make sure that you're part of that financial action task force, which is very strict. If you're going to have any access to the international banking market, you can't be involved in money laundering, terrorist financing. Cameroon is not very good on that score, but you want to be star billing, and the United States will welcome you very quickly into the international banking community.
Thank you. Okay, who is next? Mr. Crise, please.
Thank you all very much, distinguished guests and lawyers. My question actually is a follow-up on 1608, I believe Roman 15. And I've always heard it being said that at the United Nations there was no union treaty signed between French Cameroon and Southern Cameroons. Can you elaborate on that and what effect it would have going forward as far as ICC and ICJ? Thank you.
Well, the treaty issue really is, that wouldn't have impact on the International Criminal Court. That's an individual action for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. It would more properly be a treaty issue brought by, we would argue, the independent nation of Amazonia against the government of Cameroon for violating the treaty obligations that were imposed and what were signed by Mr. Biya. But that would be the International Court of Justice. I think it's a very promising way to try to get an early test of the international recognition that Amazonia does have the legitimate trappings of independence, because you have to be a nation in order to have standing to sue. India pursued a case before it was independent from Great Britain on the ground that it was de facto exercising and entitled to sovereignty, and was given standing in the International Criminal Court. But Bruce, did you want to evaluate further? It would be an ICJ case, not an international criminal court.
I would just add that, yes, it's an ICJ case, and I think doing some thinking recently, it occurs to me that we could cast these as treaties. There is a treaty where Biya said, I'm pulling back to where we originally belong. That's 1960. Didn't include Amazonia. But I believe also that any of the accords, the initial, as we said, the Fumban Accord, the initial constitution, these are all written promises that are in the nature of a treaty between two nations that have been breached, that we could go to the International Court of Justice to enforce. And there are other, once we get their minds wrapped around the idea that we're an independent nation, then the taking of the oil money, the removal of all of the revenues from the oil money away from Amazonia, shipping it to France, keeping it there, those also are wrongs that we believe could be addressed. But once you get to that point, I think, and once again, I just want to make sure that we're clear here. Many of these things, the power is not in the judgment. The power is having the courage, the ability, the intellectual horsepower to make them real, to file them, to bring them, and the press that follows. You get to drive the narrative. France is being sued for stealing from these guys. France is being sued, Macron is being sued for murdering children. These are things that give you the power to push forward the agenda and make it possible to realize independence and freedom. Because once the world changes its mind, and my belief is once the world knows, it will make up its mind, and independence will inexorably follow. Unless we live in a world that I truly don't understand and don't want to live in, and I don't think it's that way.
I think there are still people and people that are watching that want to do good and want to join in and help us do this good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but let me say this. I believe strongly that this gentleman seated here, my left and my right, and this law firm, based on their experience, that some of which we have heard, they have the intellectual capital to lay the legal foundation of our nation, for our nation, to lay down the legal arguments before any international court and make it clear, as we know, just as we have been laying for the past 58 years, through all our movements, we have tried to tell the whole world to look into their own treaties, the laws that govern nations, from the United Nations, the General Assembly resolutions, and say truly that we have every legal basis to consider ourselves a separate and independent nation. But as we have seen, the world has been looking away from that argument, as if they did not hear us, as if it did not matter. That's what they told us for all these years. And that empowered French Cameroon to chase some of us out of the country, and we have no home today. But because why? The legal argument is disputable. We have been to the to the United Nations. They are telling us that we have already been decolonized. You laugh at that, but they tell you that according to our records, you are not among the decolonized countries. You are among the decolonized. So that is the cloak they are hiding under to continue colonizing us. But there is one thing they cannot argue, which is undisputable: the reality of what is happening. The killings, the burnings, the maiming, the burning of our villages, the sheer atrocities on all the atrocity crimes, the genocide. My own brother was shot on the bed because he was sick, sleeping. He could not run when the thugs came to kill him. They shot him right there on the bed and killed him. Now, these things are being documented as we speak. Universities have taken upon themselves, about 8 universities around the world, and they are documenting these things. Recently, international organizations that always toed the line of the oppressor and looked away, did not say anything, are forced by the sheer volume of atrocities to tell some truth, even including the Human Rights Watch, even Amnesty International, and we have those reports. So this is what's happening. The world has started documenting these realities. And many countries, for less than what we have suffered, have obtained the right to their self-determination. But we, in addition to all our legal arguments for a separate nation, we have suffered far beyond what others have suffered. Because here's the thing: no matter how much these things are documented, if we don't prosecute, it will amount to nothing. The whole world can document all these atrocities. If we don't find a law firm that can really use this as the raw materials, prosecute this Paul Biya and Macron, then these things will not help us. But if they will help us to give us visibility by bringing these crimes to the International Court, obtaining a judgment, or just bringing it, make sure that that is the focus of the argument. Now, and then the other way around is, how do we stop this? Because the only way you can stop this, in fact, it cannot be anything less than allowing these people to go. First of all, then the argument of they were not even together as one country in the first place. So this is this is very welcome. This is what we have to do now. Now that even Human Rights Watch own report confirms that these things are happening, and they are even calling it genocide. So on these grounds, I believe that with their support and through litigation, we can bring these things to the conscience of the international community and force them to do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a lot of time left in here. I'm going to take 2 more questions, then I will get back to Barrister Ambe before we round up in here. The gentleman in the khaki suit, sir, your hand has been up. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My question is, before we get to this point, we have been pursuing some legal matters, like we have like the Abuja Declaration, we have the Banjul Communication 266 that has already ruled that Southern Cameroonians are a people. And Nigerian Abuja Declaration states that Nigeria does not have any maritime boundary with La République du Cameroun. Are these things useful in this situation at this time? And secondly, I want to ask, when we are talking of a currency, sometimes if there is a scramble over Amazonia, it is not for these human beings that are sitting here. It's not for our children that are being slaughtered. It is for the sticks of kola nuts. The palm trees that are located are found in Amazonia. How can we use these things? As the saying goes, use what you have to get what you want. How can we use these things to get what we want? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. Did you direct your questions to who? Who precisely do you want to answer?
To the lawyers.
Well, okay.
Well, international law turns substantially just on past practices and statements. It's not codified like many statutes are. So any kind of precedent that acknowledges in any form, at any time, the independence, the nationhood of Amazonia is helpful. It's not dispositive, but that's helpful. With regard to the resources that Amazonia is endowed with, I think that the greatest way in which you can utilize your human capital and other capital is simply to create a real system of a rule of law. Most people, they say, they have a natural desire to acquire material possessions. You don't have to encourage people to get money, make money, but they need reassurance that it's not going to be stolen, it's not going to be cheated, they're not going to be confiscated through taxation or otherwise. And that will produce wealth very quickly. You have some places like Hong Kong, virtually no natural resources, but they had rule of law that they inherited from Great Britain, prospered far more than mainland China that does not. I think that as long as you have a stable government that treats everybody fairly, you will be the star economic locomotive of all of West Africa.
If I may paraphrase a little bit his question, I think he was asking, the Southern Cameroon has a lot of natural resources. Is it possible that we can trade some of those resources to prosecute this struggle? I think that was what it meant.
Well, I mean, that's something that I don't know how property ownership works in Southern Cameroon. Basically saying, can you convert those resources into cash and then use the money to pay the resources needed to prosecute the cases? That's, I think, outside of our control.
Okay.
I don't know how you can export capital there. I don't know what BN permits you to do.
In other words, I am saying that there are people out there that need what we have, but we cannot get a way to find them. Is this law firm in a position to lobby like, oh, Mr. Peter, I am a client to Mr. John, and Mr. John has this, and this is the suffering of Mr. John. Can you help me have Mr. John, who is my client?
It's fine. Let me help you answer that question.
I think I'm...
I know. I understand the question. Let me answer the question. The answer to the question is no. And the reason the answer to the question is no is because none of us seated in here, none of us, Ambazonians, have the legitimacy to mortgage the resources of the Southern Cameroon today. So we cannot do that. Who gave me, you, Mr. Bo, Mr. Sako, Mr. Kometa, Mr. Anu, whoever, any of us, who gave you that right to mortgage what belongs to 8 million people? How are you going to explain it to today's generation and the generation of tomorrow? So we don't have it. The answer to that question is an absolute no, in my opinion. And I believe the opinion of my senior colleague here and most reasonable people. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't agree totally with him. I think the only reason is because we don't have total control over those resources. And to answer my brother, what he's trying to say is, can we use these resources to find sponsors? Those that will sponsor us fight this war. Because we don't have the money, but we have the resources. Do we have those people out there that are ready to come out and say, Ambazonians, we have money to sponsor you guys. What do you guys have on the table? We are looking for those sponsors. Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's right. And one of the things, to tie this back into us, how we can help you, I don't think you're saying, would I take a boat for my legal fees? No. Because the answer is yes. But no, just kidding. We could negotiate deals. We work with various international groups. If you had, say, you needed an oil contract, which I don't think you can do that because I think BIA has wrapped that up. But if you need some help or guidance in packaging together materials, crops, resources to secure financing, development loans, we can help you with that. That's part of building a nation, but it can also be part of getting a nation. And like you say, what we have to get what we want, I would say what we need. And yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you or anyone here has the ability to gather materials, assets, goods, probably not services because they don't translate that well internationally, we can help you negotiating contracts to either sell them, and if we can't, we'll tell you we can't, and we'll find someone that can, or to package them for financing for banks. Banks will loan money. There are banks out there that will loan money and say, this is a pretty good deal. You know, the X hectares of hardwood, that anticipated, yes, we can loan money. That's how the American agricultural system works. It works on last year's money, next year's payment. So if I'm hearing your question correctly, then that's the answer.
Hold on a second, please. Hold on a second. This is a sensitive subject, and I would really suggest we don't discuss this in here with cameras in here. Please. I will take the next question, please. The last one. Okay, sir.
Distinguished guest, President Sako, my able secretary Crise. Sorry, I'm selling after the market. I happen to be working here. I didn't actually know about this meeting until a colleague of mine downstairs asked me, where are you from? I told him I'm from Ambazonia, Cameroon, and it was a she. She was like, they're meeting upstairs, So I just came. I'm not exactly sure on what the meeting is predicated on, but at least I know we are here to find peace, to discuss normalization in Ambazonia. My only concern, and I'm not directing my question to any particular person, is the fact that we have a crowded field of leaders out there. I know of the IG, which we are here today. That's my own leadership I know of. And that's the problem. Whatever solution we are looking for, that also is a situation that requires its own solution. Because we cannot negotiate here and try to look for solution. We agree on things when there's a spoiler somewhere out there who is going to kind of neutralize our effort. So my question to anybody is, are we going to co-opt all the other leaders if we have that means? Or are we going to neutralize them? What are we going to do with them in order to be able to have a clear way forward?
Thank you. I will let the President and maybe Comrade Bo take that.
Yes. Thank you, Comrade, for your question. I want to.
I'm sorry, my name is Patrick.
Patrick, thank you. One thing we should know is that we are not here as one organization. This is a coalition seated here today. It's called the Ambazonia Coalition Team. And so this is the coalition of the willing that see the need for us to have a negotiated settlement at this time and embrace the only viable option that we have on the table proposed by the international community. So we are already about 13 organizations together. So you might number 2 or 3 that may not be amongst us. But I want to tell you that we at least constitute the critical mass to proceed on matters like this. We will never attain 100%. That's utopian. But if we have the critical mass on the issues pertaining to issues like this one, concerning, and one thing I should also mention is that the one thing that unites all Ambazonians is our goal. The one thing that unites all of us is independence, which is our goal. And when we find a means of getting that independence, even opposition dies in the eyes of Ground Zero because Ground Zero cannot tolerate you when we see clearly, as we are making it clear today, that this is a path towards their ultimate goal. All those who are hiding and living and surviving in trenches and those who are dying and they are not sure of tomorrow, they see that, they understand us clearly that this is for independence, it's not to enrich anybody. Opposition dies in their eyes. And those who really want to survive must understand when Amazonia is lifted above their organizations, they have to bow. So I want to say that we have what it takes at this time to proceed. We are here as a coalition, not as an organization.
Yeah, just to add to that, it does not mean that ACT has blocked the door. The doors are open for those who are not yet, who have not yet signed up to ACT. Again, the question we should be asking is, yes, we have a law firm, and what are we going to do? This is not pro bono. I mean, they have to be flying left and right, filing files, doing these documents. So we have to go back to our people. And with all of us here, we have to appeal to our people because certainly they deserve some compensation. So it's, we have to think about that. And again, we have said ACT is a collaboration of the willing. And so if there are 2, 3 who don't want to be part of it, you will not force them to join it. And you will not stay behind and say, oh, because they're not here, we cannot continue. No, our people, all of us agreed on the 22nd of September to get that independence. And we have to keep on working towards that independence. Not everybody will be with us. That's the truth. No, not every group will join us, but the majority are already working together. So all of us sitting here, if there's anything you can do to help to bring them on board, we have said the door is open. They are all are welcome as Ambazonians to come, and we keep on with the struggle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. By this time, yes.
Mr. Kmer, can I actually just ask the question about Mr.
That was a question, okay.
No. The question actually was, Mr. Anu, we have Fine and Duval here. They are law firm. We need to pay them. And my question was directed at Mr. Bo, Mr. Sako, and Mr. Kmer. How do we raise the money to foot their bills and make sure that whatever project we are carrying, whatever project we are carrying is seen fully? Because if their bills are not footed, then They are attorneys and they have families of their own.
All right.
Point of clarification, please.
Yes, go ahead, quickly.
My clarification is as to whether or not the law firm would also help us raise funds, call the American community and say these people need some help.
Well, I will let them speak for that. All right, let's start with Bo.
I'll come to this microphone.
All right.
Because I think I think we've come to a very important subject here, not because the other part was not important. That's why I'm coming back to this microphone. Everything we have said means nothing unless we do what we must do. When Bruce spoke a moment ago, he said, your time, your talent, your treasure. I will stress your treasure. I stress your time too, and your talent. But please, people of Ambazonia, and those of you listening to me online, this is the time for us to realize that we will not move an inch unless we put our money where our mouths are. Unless we pursue this independence quest, unless we pursue restoration by recognizing that the military self-defense part will be funded, that the legal part will be funded, and that the diplomatic part will be funded. We also need to remember that this is not, and Mr. Fine was very clear about it, this is not the sprint, this is the marathon. Do not join this initiative believing that next month you are going to ask the law firm, when is Mr. Bia getting arrested and when is the case going to be adjudicated? Because that is not how it works. We want you in this deal, and we want all of you Ambazonians, and we want all of you from the world. If you are a decent human being, you will join the Ambazonian cause. It doesn't matter your nationality. So we are going to be looking to raise money from everyone, including our American friends. I am a proud American Ambazonian, and I believe that every American should recognize that the American Ambazonian that I am, that I don't deserve to have my family go through the kind of hell that they're going through, that generations unborn should go through what they're going. And to give us a very good picture of how much patience we need to pack when we do this. So if you commit small. If you want to commit small, commit affordable, absolutely, but you must be willing to stay the course. And we will recruit for fundraising on the basis of willingness to stay the course. Let's give ourselves a picture. The case that was filed against President Hissène of Chad was filed in 2000 in Senegal. The victims had tenacity, resilience. They were not going to give up. That is the spirit that must accompany us when we embark on this matter, as we embark on this matter. When the case was filed in 2000, Hissène knew he was going to get the protection of the Senegalese, and he did for a long while. But the survivors said, and the victims said, we are then going to go to other jurisdictions. They went to Belgium. They asked the Belgians, you've got this worldwide jurisdiction, you've got to get in this matter. And they did. And they did not give up there. They went to the International Court of Justice. They said, if Senegal is unwilling to try this fellow, then they must arrest him and send him to some other court. And they obliged the Senegalese government to arrest Hissène in 2013. And a verdict came down in 2016. That gives you an idea. 16 years they were chasing Hissène. Mr. Bia is like slippery, like mudfish in water. We are going to find him the same way Hissène was found. We are going to find the people that support him, from the Atanganjis to the commanders of the military units, to the police officers who are giving those orders, to leaders of this ruling CPDM who are giving those orders, to their families based in the United States. We are coming for you. This lawsuit is not Mr. Bia and Mr. Macron alone. It is going to be everyone. And please, Ambazonians, if there's only one thing you must support the legal and diplomatic initiative that Fine and Duval are putting forward for us today. Thank you.
All right. I think the question was also asked to the attorney, whether you can help Ambazonians raise money within the American community.
If you want me to speak at events, I'm always willing to speak in favor of justice.
Okay.
That's my entire life. I am not an expert, and my expertise is not going out and making phone calls to fundraise. I speak about ideas, and that's what I'm eager and willing to do. But I don't want to promise something that I'm incompetent at and wouldn't feel comfortable doing anyway.
Thank you. Mr. President?
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching us online, this is Ambazonia. It's for Amba is going to be for Ambazonians before others will come to help us. We have to face the reality of this struggle to know that it is an all-pronged approach. It's not just you know, the bullets that are flying on the ground. We will not defend our way to an independent nation. We must understand that it's a comprehensive approach. We must appreciate that no matter how much we fight on the ground, there's going to be negotiations. We're going to end on the table. That no matter how much we document about these atrocities, there's going to be prosecution. So, and that we have to build relationships that we're going to use to get to our goal sooner than later. And that is why some people want to donate just for one particular thing, because that's what they know. I'm just here to remind you that it takes all these approaches for us to get there sooner than later. So as much as you are making your sacrifices for one thing, remember, you should not leave the others. When it will come to this, I expect that if you are giving for self-defense or whatever, remember, we need your $50, we need your $20 for the long haul, because when we attack from all angles, we get there sooner than later. When when you have an enemy that is like an elephant and you don't have a machine gun, you only have spears, what do? You make sure you use many spears, one here, one here. When the spears are so many and it's so completely overwhelmed, then it goes down. So if we're just targeting one side, he has enough energy to run for too long. But as we are coming with the legal and going through the diplomatic relations that we build, and then we are defending ourselves to survive, I think we will get there sooner than later.
Thank you. Mr. Duval?
I would just echo and say you can't suffer your way to your goal. And you can't, hopefully, the people of Amazonia will not be required to continue to bleed their way to freedom. We're offering an alternative. And I think it's an alternative that everyone should get behind, because the civil war that's looming isn't the answer. It's just not going to work. They have all the guns. They have all the trained military. There are ways to do this, and simply hoping isn't a plan. Simply suffering isn't an objective. And not to minimize anyone's suffering, but you have an opportunity to do more, and we can all do this together. And once again, we're honored to be a part of this.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm sorry I seized this microphone. I hope that, and I'm talking to Ambazonians, that we are not misunderstood, because there are spin doctors who will go there and say we have abandoned our people on the ground. This effort amounts to no abandonment of our people on the ground. It is, we have discovered that a three-pronged approach will get us to the end faster than just doing one thing and doing it very well. So that's it.
All right. Reverend Asson, and then Chairman Kmer before we round up.
Okay. I want to tell the people of Ambazonia, as an Ambazonia woman, that we have confidence in this law firm, and you all should come on board. And I have a message for Miss Patricia Scotland in UK, that you are a woman and you know the truth about what is happening in Ambazonia, and you have decided to sell your conscience to the enemies because of your personal gain. But I want to remind you that in the book of Exodus 1:15, verse 22, there was a lady called Fcfa. She was there to rescue the young children. I don't know if you have kids or not, but if you don't, I believe your sisters have kids. And as a woman, seeing the atrocities, the killing of our young children, 6 years old, 3 months old, the child that was shot in the stomach and the intestines came out. You see our mothers burying their children, and you have decided to deceive the international community with the truth. I want God to touch you to search your conscience and put yourself in the life of Ambazonian women who carried these children for 9 months, and they are being killed innocently. Our house was destroyed by La Republique. My dad and my mom's grave was destroyed for just no cause. My nephews were shot in Kumba, 15 years old. And you have the truth, you have the right to make the right from the wrong. I want to tell you, Patricia Scotland, that whatever game you are playing with poor beer, being Vondo, you should stop it right now. If not, the wrath of God will visit you and your family. And for those CPDN women Ambazonians that are conniving with La Republique to come and burn our villages and kill our children, I'm telling you, we will do our best as Ambazonian women to look for you and your generation with this law firm. Please, Ambazonian women, come on board. Let's raise the fund that we need to support this law firm. These boys are dying on a daily basis. We cannot just continue to let them fight without having any legal firm to defend them or bring Paul Biya and Atanganji to the law. We're going to go with this law firm with all confidence. They are Christians. We started with prayers that tells you that they believe in God. And we are not arguing with this restoration. We are not secessionists. We are restoring our independence. So we are not debating with anybody. Whoever is calling us terrorists, you're just wasting your time because we are restoring what rightfully belongs to us. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for coming. By the grace of God, we will get to Buea very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, time is not on our side.
Okay. As earlier said, ACT, Ambazonia Coalition team is ready to sit at the table with the enemy, that is La Republique, for negotiations. Therefore, our brothers who are with us, who started this fight with us, they are for restoration also. We just have differences. This does not mean that these differences we cannot find common ground. We will find common ground. I would like that all of us come out, agree, and continue as we did on the 22nd of September 2017. Once more, the law firm is not only about Biya and Tanganji and the ministers. No, all the local policemen, the gendarmes who have been killing people, all the mayors, all of those ones, they too will be on the list. So, fellow Southern Cameroonians, we are appealing to all of you. We know with the hard times that have been going on, we have been spending a lot. But no other person will do this for us. No other person but us. Therefore, let us sacrifice. We are building a future for our children. Yes, so we are preparing for posterity. So let us sacrifice and make sure posterity does not go through what our forefathers and us now are going through. So once more, we are appealing, please sacrifice. To all my brothers and sisters who enjoy going to the celebrations and spending, think again. To all those, we are not saying you should not have your life, you should have your life, but think about the suffering masses, think about what we are fighting for, and if you are spending 100 on something for a leisure, you can cut it down to 50. All is that nothing is small. Nothing is small. If just in the DC metropolis, if all Ambazonians came out and gave just $50 a month, we would have millions of dollars. So please, we're appealing to all of you, let us support this law firm. Let us support this law firm to sue La Republique and Paul Biya and all his cohorts And of course, they will always be with us to support us in what we are doing. So we need to support them too financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Fine and Deval, for taking up our case. On behalf of the Ambazonian people, I want to say a big, big thank you to you and your law firm. And thank you, Mr. President, Comrade Bo, Reverend Asong, Chairman, Committee, for showing up to participate in this press conference. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now added the third arm, which makes the trinity that makes the struggle, the fight for this independence complete. We have the military arm, we have the diplomacy arm, and now we have the legal arm. It makes this the various fronts, abuse the various fronts and make them complete. Now, we've been talking about how to fund it here. I just want to say one thing to every Ambazonian who is out there. There is no doubt that every single Ambazonian out there has been affected one way or the other. Either your property has been razed, your brother has been killed, your sister has been killed, your parents have been killed, some are in jail. We all have the reason to step up and to support this legal initiative, because at the end of the day, when rebuilding comes, all that we have suffered would have to be accounted for. What they call reparations would have to come up in the law case, in the legal suit like this one. And so the appeal is to every Ambazonian out there, this is the moment to rise up and fund this case. Thank you again for showing up. I just want to announce also that the rally, the Million Man March that was scheduled for tomorrow, some of you are aware, it has been canceled because of the public health emergency declared here in the District of Columbia. So that rally is no longer taking place. Postponed, suspended, that is the word. All right. When politicians say they suspend their campaign, you know, you know what they mean. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming up. God bless you all. God bless you, sirs. Thank you.